Hello, welcome to Life Talk for Wednesday, August the 23rd, 2017. I'm Mark Crutcher.
And I'm Renee Hobbs. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. We've got an interesting article that just came out today about the Russian anti-abortion movement, pro-life movement in Russia.
And Lord knows they need one.
And they need one, and it seems like, from what I can tell from this article and from some other things that I've seen lately, they're really making pretty profound progress.
Seems like it.
And they've got a lot of support from within the government, which is really interesting that the Russian government is now actively helping these pro-life groups. And we have to remember, abortion has been legal in Russia for almost 100 years.
Long time.
They were the first industrialized nation on earth to legalize abortion. And now it looks like they might be the first industrialized nation on earth to reverse that because of their horrible experience with it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute because this relates to an article that I wrote some time ago. And I want to get back to this issue of Russia here in just a second, or the Soviet Union, actually, to be more accurate. But, you know, I see a lot of things all the time, and we talk to people. We'll have people call here, and they're not despondent or suicidal or fixing to jump off a building or anything. But there's a lot of people in the pro-life movement who seem to have adopted this idea that that they can't win, and they're just. And that's one of the reasons I have always, since the day we started Life Talk in 1999, I always end the show the same way. We're not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. And I'm telling you, we are winning. We can win this battle. And I wrote an article some time ago, basically based on the It's a Wonderful Life story with George Bailey.
Right.
You know, he had George Bailey was the character in the movie. And for those of you, for the 2 or 3 people in the world who haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, but you know, he was at the beginning of the movie. He was on a bridge about to commit suicide because he thought his life had counted for nothing. Some things had gone badly, and this angel appeared to him. Clarence came to see him and demonstrated to him, showed him what the world would have been like, his little community would have been like, had he not lived. And at the end of the movie, it turned him around, and he didn't realize all the lives he had touched and all the differences he had made in his community. And I wrote an article called The George Bailey Syndrome and how it affects the pro-life movement, because a lot of people think, you know, we've been at this 40-something years, abortion's still legal, they're still killing 3,000 babies a day.
That's exhausting, right?
Yes, and are we really making any progress? What have we accomplished for all this? And you'll even hear some people in the pro-life movement, who I won't name, but are pretty reprehensible people, who attack the rest of the pro-life movement by saying, you know, you've accomplished nothing, you've wasted your time. Y'all stand back, we'll show you how it's done. And so these Johnny-come-latelys move in and think they're the keepers of the flame. But let's talk a little bit about what we have accomplished. First off, let's make a point. When I started Life Dynamics in 1992, there were over 2,000 freestanding abortion clinics in the country. The number I remember initially was 2,126, but it was over 2,100. Today, there's what, 550 or so? You keep up with that better.
Yeah, something like that.
Somewhere around 550.
Yeah.
So since 92, 3/4 of the abortion clinics in this country have closed permanently, right? And there's been a corresponding drop in the abortion rate. And when I first started, when I first started Life Dynamics, I'd been in the movement already for many years at that time. There were about 5,000 abortions a day being done in the United States. Today, there are slightly under 3,000 a day. Now, 3,000 babies being killed every day is undeniably a tragedy. It's an embarrassment. The country ought to be ashamed of what it's doing. But the fact is, that's 2,000 babies fewer per day today in a country with a much bigger population than it was then, than what were being killed then.
Right.
And for these people, especially these people that call themselves pro-life, to come out here and say, oh, the mainstream pro-life movement has accomplished nothing. What they're saying is those 2,000 babies don't count for anything.
Right, and it could be a whole lot worse, and I know that you're going to get into that also.
It could be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse. So we've gone from 5,000 to 3,000, and that continues to drop. right? That's a 40% drop in the abortion rate. I still say, had it not been for the pro-life movement, what you were just alluding to just a moment ago is true. That number wouldn't have gone from 5,000 to 3,000. It would have gone from 5,000 to 10,000 or more.
More, yeah.
Who knows? We wouldn't now be standing on the graves of 60 million babies, which is horrible enough to think about in its own. But we'd be standing on the graves of 250 million or 300 million babies very easily. Now, if you don't think that that's true, let me give you some information here. And this goes back to the Russian thing. The Soviet Union was the first industrialized nation on earth to legalize abortion. When the Soviet Union collapsed, and actually right up before that, they did a study on what the effects of abortion had been on Soviet culture. What they discovered was truly stunning to me. During the time of the Soviet Union, the average Soviet woman, had 9 abortions during her childbearing years. 9 abortions.
Sad.
On average.
Birth control.
Yeah, well, of course, we're using it as birth control too, but even our numbers aren't approaching anything like that. In the Soviet Union, during the time it existed, 90% of all first pregnancies were aborted. 90%. And 60% of all pregnancies that took place after the first pregnancy were aborted. So 90% of all first pregnancies, 60% of all pregnancies after that, average woman having 9 abortions during her childbearing years. And they say there was a lot more abortions that were either illegal or underreported. In some parts of the Soviet Union, they documented that it was common for women to have 25 to 28 abortions, well beyond the national average of 9. And the Russian government is now saying that the consequences of that have been catastrophic. Not only they're having major health problems for women in the Soviet Union, but also the economics and the demographics of the country are in deep trouble.
Right.
They're having to pay women now to have babies. They're way below replacement rate, which we are here in the United States as well. The thing that's bailing us out is we've got a neighbor to the south that we can drag all these people in. We talked about this last week, how the abortion issue has fueled the immigration issue. But the Soviet Union didn't have that. And so they're having all these demographic problems. We're seeing it in Japan, we're seeing it in France, we're seeing it in a lot of countries where they're actually having now to go out and encourage women. In France, a woman can get, I think it's $2,000 for having a baby. She doesn't have to be married. She doesn't have to be an adult. She can be a teenager. If she'll have a baby, they'll give her a $2,000 stipend from the government. And the reality is, that's what happens in a country where you have no pro-life movement. Because when you have no pro-life movement, you have no opposition. And when you have no opposition, you have no restraint.
That's right.
And that's what happened in the Soviet Union.
And they are definitely stepping up their game, because it looks like they have 1 million signatures that are going to go to the president there to it's an organization called For Life, to abolish abortion altogether.
And like I said, we were saying earlier, they're getting help from within the Russian government. But what I was saying earlier, this is what happened in the Soviet Union is a prototype for what happens in a country where you don't have a pro-life movement. Had we not had a pro-life movement in this country, first off, the right to life of the unborn would not even be discussed. It's hard enough to discuss it with millions of people in the pro-life movement. It wouldn't be discussed at all. There would be nobody out there arguing about the rights of the unborn child. I am convinced, and I think the things that we've seen recently bear this out, I think there'd be an abortion clinic in every mall and strip shopping center in the country. I think you could go down here to the mall here in Denton or in Louisville or whatever it might be, every mall in this country, I think you'd have a Planned Parenthood facility in every one of them. Kind of, used to, you didn't think about, when I was a kid, for example, I got my first pair of glasses when I was 14, got my driver's license. it took a week or 10 days to get your glasses. You had to go specific places, and they had to send off for them. They come. Nobody ever thought there'd be, 2 or 3 eyeglass places in every mall, right?
Right.
That was just unheard of.
Right.
I think that same thing would have happened here, and with abortion clinics. And you've had pro-aborts openly state that they'd like to have at least a referral center, like a Planned Parenthood referral center in every mall that teenage girls could go into. I believe every university and public school in America would either have an on-site abortion clinic, had there never been a pro-life movement, or they'd have a contract with a local clinic. Now, I've had people challenge me on that. And this last week, we reported to you on a story about a school district in Pennsylvania that is now voting to allow a Planned Parenthood facility to be set up inside the school.
Yeah, and the lady, Kathy, who we were going to have on as a guest, had said that there's several high schools in Pennsylvania already that have Planned Parenthood clinics in their schools that I was not aware of.
I wasn't aware of that either.
So, yeah.
But I think that without the pro-life movement, there'd be an abortion clinic in every school in this country. Every university would certainly have one. And I think a lot of public high schools would either have one on site or they'd have a contract with a nearby abortion clinic. There would be no debate if it weren't for the pro-life movement about taxpayer funding of abortion. Taxpayer funding of abortion would have been a reality from day one. They'd have been taking money without even apologizing for it. They'd have been taking money out of everybody's check to pay for other people's abortions. Again, here's another issue that we've just seen evidence of. We wouldn't be seeing the faces of children with things like Down syndrome because abortion would now be the default position for every woman carrying a baby that was not perfect in the eyes of the people who were the geneticists that were testing these babies. I think women would be hounded into having abortions. It would almost be like, and you've had people out here say, women, you've had ethicists saying we're approaching the point where a woman who has an imperfect baby is considered irresponsible because she had the option of having an abortion and she didn't take it, so she's irresponsible.
Right, and we kind of went over this too last week with Iceland aborting all of the Down syndrome babies there.
You have a whole country in which they admit they have 2 Down syndrome babies born per year in the whole country. And they're treating this like they've eradicated Down syndrome. Well, yeah, you can eradicate everything. You name me a malady that you can't eradicate if you just kill the right people. Homelessness, right? Just kill everybody that doesn't have a home. You've eradicated homelessness. These people in Iceland are actually bragging about that, and American media are going over there doing articles about them, like we talked about last week, where they're saying Iceland has basically eradicated Down syndrome. Yeah, if you kill all the babies that have Down syndrome, then you will eradicate it, right? We can eradicate child abuse. Any child that's abused, round them up and kill them. Then you don't have any more child abuse. Dogs and cats, if they're abused, just shoot them all. You won't have any more animal abuse. And like I said, Lowry, like you were saying, that's what Iceland has done. And believe me, if it had not been for the pro-life movement, there would be no Crisis Pregnancy Center network. If a woman did not want to have an abortion, she would have absolutely no one to go to. So the point I'm trying to make here is, and the reason this came to mind today was this thing in Russia, where it's going to be interesting that a country that we have criticized all these years as being kind of barbaric and backward, that we would still allow abortion and they stop. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, it sure really would.
Happened? And by the way, it's already happened in other former Soviet Union countries like Poland, for example. And now you have all these moves to make Poland legalize abortion through the UN and other places. But the point I'm trying to make here is, yes, the pro-life movement has made mistakes. I've made mistakes. Life Dynamics has made mistakes. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to make some more, as is every other pro-life group in this country, as is every other pro-life individual in this country, because we're all human beings. We are going to make more mistakes. But if you think that we haven't accomplished anything, think again. We've accomplished an enormous amount. And I'm telling you right now, what I said a moment ago is true, Renee. The Soviet Union was a prototype for what happens in a country where you have no pro-life opposition because you have no restraint, and the abortion lobby will just run wild, which is what they did there, and it's what they would have done here had we not existed. So yeah, we've made mistakes. We're going to make more. We could have done a lot of things better. I can tell you for sure there are things that if I could go back to the day that I started Life Dynamics in 1992, there's a lot of things I'd do differently. But that's life. How many times have you and I talked about, we've talked about it for example, with your kids and my daughter Sheila. If you could go back and be 16 years old and know what you know now.
How things would be different.
How much different would you do things than what you did them?
Right.
A lot, right? You say you would, you might not have, but we all say that. But the fact is we can't go back and be 16 again. But the truth is that if we could go back, I don't think I could put one pro-life person in this room, pro-life leader, individual, it doesn't matter, who wouldn't say that if they could go back to the day they got in the pro-life movement, they wouldn't do things different. We've all made mistakes, and we will make more. But to suggest that we haven't accomplished anything, or to be downtrodden if you're one of the pro-lifers who doesn't say that, but you're just depressed by what you see and you think, oh, our society's collapsing, we're never going to win this thing. We've been at it a little over 40 years, right? We've made enormous progress in that time. The Soviet Union has had legalized abortion for almost 100 years, and they're about to turn it around. So don't get discouraged, and don't let anybody else, and especially fellow pro-lifers, tell you you haven't accomplished anything, because that is an out-and-out, bald-faced lie. And again, I'll go back to just one statistic here. We've reduced the abortion rate from 5,000 a day to slightly under 3,000 a day. If you say we haven't accomplished anything, or if you're downtrodden because you don't think we've accomplished anything, then you've got to sit here and look me in the face and tell me that those 2,000 babies that would have been killed today, who weren't killed today, don't count for anything. They don't. Those babies don't count. And if you say that, don't tell me you're pro-life. Every single one of those babies counts. You know, I've asked this question to you before, and I've talked about it to others. We know God died on the cross for you, did he not? You know that. Okay. He died on the cross for every one of us, didn't he? But let me ask you this. If Jesus had known that he was dying on the cross, but he was only going to save one of us, would he have done it?
Sure.
Absolutely. Right? That is the model for us to use. The pro-life movement, whatever it does today, it saved 2,000 babies today.
Right.
And tomorrow and yesterday, right? Don't sit here and tell me you're pro-life and tell me that we hadn't accomplished anything.
Right.
Right?
I agree.
Everything that we've done in the pro-life movement, every nickel that we've spent, every tear that we've shed, every ounce of blood that we've shed, whatever we've paid would have been worth it for one baby if we're going to use Christ as our model, right?
That's right.
All right. So don't let anybody tell you that you hadn't accomplished anything, because you have. Don't get that attitude. Anyway, we got to take a real short break here because Renee's got to bring you a message that she's brought you before about how to get a free pro-life pin.
Hi, have you seen this pin? It's really neat, and people all over America are using them to show their support for the pro-life cause. They're available from Life Dynamics for $5, but because you're a Life Talk viewer, I'm going to make you an offer you can't resist. If you don't already have one of these pins, go to lifedynamics.com/prolifepin. Then when you check out, use the promo code at the bottom of the screen and I'll send you one of these pins as my gift. I'll even pay the postage. If you prefer, you can also order by phone at area code 940-380-8800. Now you can't beat that price, right? So order yours today and make sure all of your pro-life friends get one for themselves. Again, go to lifedynamics.com/prolifepin and use the promo code below or call 940-380-8800.
we're back. Got anything else there, Renee?
Nope, just send in your comments or suggestions for shows. We would like to use those for our future shows, and you'll get a mug if we use your suggestion.
Your idea, or if we answer your question, or whatever it might be. And we've done a lot of stuff lately on the issue of Down syndrome. And part of that is because we're working on a project that we really can't reveal right now that's related to that issue. But in doing the research that Renee's been doing, we've come across some information that's pretty interesting, that the issue of Down syndrome and abortion may be a little bit different than what we've seen, and we're going to do a little bit more. And I think we ought to plan, unless something big happens that we need to cover. I think on our Friday show we ought to talk about that issue, because it's some very neat information that we've come across that I think people will really be interested in. So anyway, that's all the time we have for today's show. Be sure and join us Friday for that show. In the meantime, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you on Friday.